All right.
All right. Okay, everyone. So I'm Vera Suarez.
And I'm Maria Magdalena Lamp. That is my full and real name. And we are here to talk to you guys today about the power of words and how to use copy and content and storytelling to grow your business and how to do it most effectively and impactfully. We are Do All Right. That is the name of our copy and content agency based here in Tallinn. I myself, born and raised in Estonia, have been doing copy and content in Estonia for Estonian startups for more years than I care to count, probably around a decade by now. And I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, I am not born and raised Estonian, although I love living here. I've been here about 4 years, close to 5 years. I was originally born in Ukraine, but I lived most of my life in the US since I was 9 until about 4 years ago. And I have a really varied background in terms of professional experience, from real estate to all kinds of other things through college and high school. But at some point I started freelance writing right before we moved here, actually. And after some time, I knew I wanted to pick it up again, but I knew I wanted a partner, because the worst thing to do is be lonely when you're writing and have nobody to share your hilarious ideas with. And so I found the most creative writer I knew, and we've been teamed up for 2 years now. And we, like Maria said, we mostly do copy and content and strategy for predominantly startups, some other bigger companies, some here in Estonia, some in the US, some in other places. These are just some of the clients that are in our portfolio. I'm sure you recognize at least a few of them. And yeah, it's been quite a journey, but we wanted to share with you today really how you could use what we kind of tell our clients about as you're thinking through, working through your ideas and turning them into businesses that you would like to keep growing with either investment or whatever it is your trajectory is after Prototron. And I think we can probably get to that.
Let's get to it.
All right.
So I just used the word storytelling. Actually, just before this, we were talking about how storytelling is dead because it's such a misleading word. And I think as soon as you say storytelling to someone who's just starting to, focus on getting a business off the ground, telling stories seems to be like, is the last thing on anyone's mind, right? Nobody has like the brain power or the resources to think of anything that sounds quite as fluffy as this, but the concept itself, it is very valid, and we are 100% here to talk to you about it. So we're using the storytelling word, but what do we mean by that?
Yeah, I think the most important thing to get across here is that when most people think of storytelling, you might think of like a fairy tale or an actual story. Now, stories are important. They absolutely are. It's the easiest way to share information, because people aren't going to remember facts. They're going to remember the story you tell around it, right? So if we think back to communication from how it started, how people shared information was storytelling. And that's really important because it was easier to remember. But in the context of what we'll be talking about today, and really what most people will mean when they're telling you to use storytelling around your brand, is more about the structures of what you want to say, not necessarily the words and the narratives and all of those things that come around it. So we're not telling you to write a story. We're telling you how to think of what are the important points you want to say to make a million stories about whatever it is that you're building.
It's essentially just the way you talk about your business. It's the way you talk about what makes you special and unique and worth investing in, or worth signing up for, or whatever the case may be. It is your really your most effective and most impactful way to show your target audience what your value is, what you bring to the table, because we all know the modern attention spans are non-existent essentially. So storytelling and using your voice and using your words is essentially your way of standing out from the crowd, attracting the right people. It's about defining your audience and going after them with the right words, that they will resonate with, essentially.
And the other thing I think is important to point out here, right? Attracting the right people, not just your clients, not just the best investor to like lead you and help you through your next stage of growth, but also at some point you're going to be hiring people, right? So the kind of impression that you make with how you talk about your company and your brand and your product, all of those things, you also want to be attracting the right people to work on these things with you. So these things matter across the board. I think one of the things that the way we talk about it or think about it is your brand story is just your non-visual brand, right? Most people think of, the typeface you're using and the colors and kind of how everything looks, but people aren't going to buy something from you or invest in you or sign up for your service based on the colors on your website. Yeah, there's a difference between something looking kind of wonky and something looking really nice, but what they will actually make the decision on is what you tell them, the words that you use, the points that you make, the communication. So actually the non-visual branding is what actually defines your brand for most people.
Yeah, especially like it's really important, I think, to and this word is another one that gets thrown around a lot, is to be authentic, because people also, they know when they're being lied to, they know when they're being sold to. So choosing your tone and choosing your words carefully in that sense will really help you connect with the audience. So far, do we want to open up the mic for a little bit to see if anyone has questions so far on like the general?
Yeah, we'll open the mic. We'll just, if you can raise your hands in the app as you're doing it, but I do want to put like a couple more admin items. So we've kind of gone over, okay, what it is a bit and why it's important. We're going to work through kind of how you should be going through this process of actually defining it going forward. So for that, I would suggest that either you open a doc on your computer, grab a piece of paper and a pen, just because you will have to be like participating in that case. Also, we will have Q&A at the end. But if you know yourself and you're like me, you will forget the question before the end. Please put your questions into the chat. We'll keep like a running list, and some of them we might be able to answer during the process. If not, we'll get to it at the end. So feel free, raise your hand, put it in the chat. We want to keep this as useful and beneficial to you as possible. So please do engage and ask questions as needed. That being said, does anybody have a hand up? I don't see you right now. Not that I can see. No. Okay. In that case, we will continue.
Cool. So your storytelling journey starts with the who of it all, namely defining as precisely as you can who you are talking to, your target audience, your target audiences. There can be multiple audiences and audience segments, but nope, you are not talking to everyone. This is a mistake that we see way too often of young startups. When you go sit them down and you ask them, okay, who are we talking to? Who are we going after? What's the audience? And they're like, of course you want everyone to use your product or your service or whatever it is. So you're like, yeah, everyone's the world is my target audience. And at this stage, it's really not. Hopefully one day it will be, but at this early of a stage, it is crucial to narrow it down to your first sort of, whether it's, low-hanging fruit or the most obvious audience that the best, that it makes sense to start with. So narrowing that down, dividing your personas and identifying them, describing them as like accurately as you can, in as much detail as you can, what do you know about them? Their age and other, demographics. Where are they? What are their interests? Where do they hang out on the internet? Or off, exactly. Traditional marketing billboards are still a thing. So this is a crucial step that a lot of people kind of tend to gloss over or rush through sometimes.
Yeah, and the other thing, again, it's not everyone, but really trying to get to the core of who your client is, right? If you've had maybe some mentoring or some workshops on marketing, you have undoubtedly heard this before. This is the same thing, right? Copy and content is part of the marketing umbrella, and your brand is basically housed in that department, or at least that's the department that will communicate your brand. But at this point, I'm guessing for most of you, it's you, maybe you and a co-founder, maybe a small team behind you. So you guys are the ones that know exactly who it is that you interact with the most. Maybe you have an MVP that you've tested. Those first clients, those are the epitome of the people who have already told you they're interested in putting money, putting the time into whatever it is that you're building. You can build out those people. You don't have to use the exact person, but you can kind of generalize a few of them, batch them together, and that will make it so much easier for you to then actually think of how you want to talk to them. What is important to this person? Maybe you have somebody who, indicated that this feature in your product is really important to them for these reasons, whereas somebody else uses it for a different reason. Maybe they're the same, maybe they're different. You can kind of figure that out. But the more granular you can get, the easier it will be for you to figure out how to talk to those people, right? I think we all know that we speak differently to different people in our lives. And so that's kind of the same idea, right? When you figure out exactly who you're talking to, you can also figure out what is important to them, how they consume that information and in what ways, and that'll make your job of actually communicating those things much easier.
Exactly. So find out what their interests are, where they hang out to look for solutions to their problems, and that will position you in the perfect place to be one of those solutions and start educating. But you can't start educating before you know what you actually need to say that will bring value, and that all starts with finding the right audience.
Yep. All right. So this is a first kind of, we want you to actually put this into practice. 2 reasons for that. A, we want you to do it. B, we want you to try it now so that if you are getting hung up on something, that can be a question that you can ask. Maybe you're not quite understanding how to segment or something like that. We can kind of help nudge you in the right way to do that. So in this section, we're going to give you just a few minutes, maybe 3-4 minutes. Take your piece of paper, take your doc, whatever, everybody works differently, and start writing out who you would be talking to. This part, I would suggest that you focus for your clients, maybe not investors or hires or anything like that, but literally who are you selling to or hoping to sell to? And then we'll kind of come back after that time. We'll give you like a 30-second warning. Also, this is a great time if you happen to finish before everybody else, or if you have a question, drop it in the chat.
Sorry, if you can hear me whispering, that's me very stealthily resolving some admin issues. I feel like we should play some like waiting room music. Yes. Have someone unmuted? No.
Again, I know we just admitted somebody just a minute ago, in case you missed the instructions, we're taking a minute to write down who your audience would be, that being your ideal client. It could be one client, maybe you have several segments of clients. If that's super easy to you because you've done this before, take a minute to actually jot down, what does this person value? What would be the most important thing to them that I provide in my product or service? Where could I communicate most effectively with them? Just really start getting as granular as you can if this is something that's pretty obvious to you, and it might not be for everyone.
Can you advise?
Yeah,
or
sure.
Later? If it's B2B, then our customers are managers.
For what industry?
Many industries, starting from agriculture, then chemical industry, the construction.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that you're asking for your specific product. You would be touching all of these different kind of industries.
Yeah.
Your product. Then we would probably say segment by those industries for sure. They are going to be reading different publications. We're big fans, like, stalk your companies on LinkedIn. Look who is, in management or in those decision-making positions. Look at their backgrounds, look at what they've listed as interesting to them. And that will kind of start painting a picture of what they're into, what they're tracking, where you can put some content to get to them when you're at that stage. So I would make that as granular as you can for each one of those industries for sure. Yeah, makes sense. Manager is also a really sort of a generic term, but there's also things that they will probably then, if they're all using your product, then they all have some pains in common, probably, right? And then you can also like segment by that. People who have this problem, you can like sort of put it into buckets. But I would also start with industries, because it also depends on the specifics of what your product is. If you want to share right now, like give us a little bit more information on it so we can kind of help. Yeah.
I developed water generator, atmospheric water generator.
Okay.
And consumers could be like construction companies, factories that need technical water. Yeah, and agriculture to water plants, etc.
But it's like a pump, or it's like generate from the air?
Yeah, atmospheric, from the air.
That's really cool. That's amazing. Yeah, so a bit more common, but yeah, I would definitely say then, the use case is effectively the same. They want to generate water for whatever it is that they're using it for. But then you could think, if you start dividing them up by industry, what you can start thinking of is like how would they actually use it? Where are they using water now, right? Agriculture is pretty kind of obvious. Maybe again, we're not familiar with the topic, but on a construction site, they would be using it differently. What's their pain point now? And why is yours better? Because then you can kind of figure out, okay, but I'll be making this point to the construction managers versus this point to the agricultural people. So if like really, really sit in the shoes of the person you're thinking of being, what is it that you're offering them that they don't already have? Ideally not a nice to have, but a have to have, or like a pain point that you're solving, and it'll probably be a bit different for all of them. But feel free to jot like your question in the chat anyway. We can always come back to it, just so we can kind of move on for now. But
all right,
yes.
Thank you so much for
sure. Yeah, and B2B is a little bit more
it is a little harder, but what the thing to like sort of remember here, and this also sounds a little trite and might sound obvious, at the end of the day, even managers are just human beings. And even though it's a different angle of selling, it's still, you're selling to a person, you're still trying to understand them and what drives them. And often in those contexts, it will be, okay, I have to make this choice, but I have a limited budget or whatever it is. And also one more point is that it might be, if you are looking to like target so many different industries, it might start getting overwhelming. Oh, well, that's so many personas. And that's the point where you might want to consider narrowing it down and picking one or two to start with. And that would be like kind of your, you know, your test audience, your test bed, so to speak. So there are a few ways to go about it.
Yeah, the other point I would just really quickly make in this use case, but also maybe there are some other people that are doing B2B. Don't forget of who's finally making the decision. Sometimes we found that clients go in and they're like, you know, we're selling to the manager. Then when it actually comes up, there's another person down the line that's actually making the final call. So really think about maybe having a separate persona for like a higher level, like why would this person make the ultimate decision? You know, the person you really need to sell is the manager. Yes, they're going to make your case, but they're going to then sell your product for you effectively to another person. And that's where I think the next part of what we're going to talk about is really, really important. It is the most important part of what we're talking about today,
which is the what.
So you know who you're going to talk to, okay? But what are you telling them? What is it that you want to get across?
As founders, we also know that sometimes you just want to tell them everything. You feel like everything about your product and everything about your business is so important and so amazing that you start shooting yourself in the foot a little bit by diluting your points. That is not to say you should just like not have any of those ideas. You should, and it's amazing. And you should first put them all down on a page. Like just brain dump of absolutely everything that you think is important about your business that you need to get across to all of your audiences.
Yeah, I think, right, there's always that analogy of like your business is your baby. You're gonna have a hard time with your baby sometimes, but it's going to be the most beautiful baby because it is yours. And so you're going to appreciate every finger and every toe, and that's great. And so what we're asking you to do is write everything about your baby that you love and is important and is just going to revolutionize the world. Put it on your piece of paper. Start there. Put everything. There's no bad ideas. There's no good ideas, but anything that you think is of relevance to you and expressing about your company, put it on a page. Ideally, you can even put them on sticky notes, because the second thing you need to do after you get it all out of your head is to organize all of those ideas. So effectively, you're going to see, are any of them related? Do any of them fall in a category that you've already listed somewhere higher on the page or on a different sticky note? See if there are patterns. See if any of those sticky notes are ideal to one of your personas, but maybe not another one. Find the patterns in all the ideas that you just put on a page.
And then as you hopefully and quite likely will start seeing them as they converge under these umbrellas of, okay, here, these are starting to look like the main points, and these are just like the slightly different facets and aspects of them. Then you're going to start sort of, the story will sort of take shape in front of your eyes. Hopefully that's the place that we're starting to get to, is that it might feel overwhelming. And we've seen this with founders a lot as well, early stage founders, is that they're like, the story is in my head. I know exactly what's so amazing about my company. I know what, like, there's a reason I founded this, right? There's a reason I believe in this. I don't know how to tell it because I'm so deep in it myself, right? And that's the problem. And so this process of sort of getting it down, organizing, and then start narrowing it down, seeing where are you repeating yourself? Are there points that you want to make that externally don't make sense or will not probably provide any value to your customers and will just distract from the main points you're making? And these are sort of the exercises that can use for that. And next, then once you've gotten to, like, at some point in this process, you're going to want some feedback. from people around you, absolutely, people close to you, whoever you have at the company already. People who are too close to you might not always be the most reliable people also to give you advice on this kind of thing, because they also are too close to the issue
or to you
or to you in a similar way. So if you can get external feedback, whether it's an external agency or just someone you know,
yeah,
anything helps. But of course, at this point, getting someone involved who has experience with doing exactly this can really help you, because there's this thing that we've heard is that, can someone external tell your story? And we would almost argue that someone external can probably tell your story a little better, or at least help you cut away the things that you don't necessarily need at this point. Yeah. So feedback is a crucial point here.
Yeah, and you can get the feedback. So ideally what you want to end up with is kind of a few messaging pillars. There's a hand on the slide, limited to a handful. 5 would be the maximum. Even down to 3 would be maybe even better, because you want to be making the same point over and over about your story, right? We can all probably tell the story of the Little Red Riding Hood. That doesn't mean that we all know all the same words, but we know the basis of the story. Why? Because the same points are repeated over and over, and it goes across languages and cultures, right? So the same idea, that's why you want to limit them down by organizing them, and getting feedback again is crucial. I would also want to add that get feedback if you have clients, potential clients, people that, have tested your MVP or whatever the case may be. Test it with them, ask them. One thing that will do for you is very quickly tell you if you're on the right track or not. And the other thing is it builds rapport with your clients. Start investing into that community that you already have around you. People that are asked kind of feedback are more likely to then be invested in what it is that they're talking about. Of course, don't ask them a billion questions all the time. You don't want to tax them, but it's perfectly okay if you feel like you have that relationship with a few people or as many people as you need to get that feedback. Test it. Also test it with strangers. I mean, honestly, at this point, I think you're figuring out you have to get really comfortable with talking about your companies, your ideas with anyone. So feel free to make it with strangers. Why not? This is what I'm doing. Because literally that's your pitch, right? Your pitch is part of your story. This is what I'm doing, XYZ. These are my points. I don't get it. What does that mean? Oh, okay, I have to say that differently. Or you use a different word next time and then people understand quicker. Okay, this is the way I should be using it, right? Source as many ideas and opinions as you can. I would also say one thing that we didn't mention is if you do have a co-founder or if you do have a team that you are already working with, make this a workshop. Have everybody put in their ideas, because people might be thinking of things from different perspectives. Maybe you're a technical co-founder or you have a technical co-founder. I guarantee they're thinking of this product differently than you are, who's maybe in charge of, selling the idea externally. And then you can kind of reconcile the differences as you go. But the most important part is get everything out, ruthlessly get rid of anything that doesn't get to the point of what it is you're really doing, and test everything that you put on a page. The last part that's on the slide anyway is review as needed. What this means is you're at a stage now, you're going to be at a different stage after Prototron, you're going to be at a different stage a few months down the line. As your company grows, changes, maybe your products offers grow, or maybe you pivot, whatever the case may be, you're going to need to come back in and review these things as they come. do these points, does this story still fit the company as it is today? And maybe some of them do, but some of them don't. Maybe all of them are still fine, but kind of get in the habit of making this a regular exercise as you see your company change.
Exactly. And this built-in review step also in a way will help take pressure off the first steps, because at first it can all feel really overwhelming, so high pressure, high stakes. Oh my God, I'm only allowed to say 3 things about my company. What are those things? And I have to commit to them now, or, or forever hold my peace. That is not, yes, you have to commit to something and you have to start somewhere, but that does not mean that there's and this is it forever. Like do or die, and these are our 3 things that we're allowed to say. So the review is there for you to know that it's okay. It's okay to try things out, see what works, see what doesn't, and go back to the drawing board if you need to. Usually it's more just adjustments here and there, or once in a while someone will completely pivot, and then you do have to restart from scratch in a lot of ways. But the review, and it kind of balances out this initial overwhelm of, oh no, what do I do?
Yeah. I think the starting big and dwindling down is really important. And I would even argue that the bigger you start, the more ideas you put on the page, the more clear it will become what your main messages about your company will need to be. And again, like Maria said, kind of takes off the pressure. You're not locked in. As we said, you're going to test these things. And the main thing that you're trying to do here isn't the exact words you're going to say. I want to point that out. Is here we're not looking for the tagline for your company. That's not what we're talking about here. This isn't copy, right? This is literally, what are the main things that I want people to understand about what we're doing here? Whether it's related to why you're doing it, the product or service that you're choosing to deliver, whatever those main ideas is. Maybe it's because, we're saving the environment, or there's a lack of, water resources, and we're trying to kind of shift how we do that. Whatever the case may be, that's what we're getting to. The how you do it is going to come next. But first, we want you to get in the habit of actually doing the idea dump. I think as writers, this is something that's super useful to us. If any of you have ever sat and tried to write something in front of a page, it is really daunting. But while practice makes perfect, doing this does not require perfection. Take your piece of paper, take your doc, start writing out the big ideas or little ideas that you have about your company. They don't have to be spelled correctly, written in any coherent format, no sentences, no capitalization, nothing. Just, it's easy. It's changing an industry, whatever the case may be. Maybe you just list your industries. This is also fine. Any idea that you have about your brand and your company, go ahead and start listing it on your page. We'll take, again, another 2-3 minutes. If you get done, which I hope you don't, oh my God, 2-3 minutes, no time.
That's nothing.
You have more ideas than that. Write any questions in the chat.
Yeah, and this is not designed to be again, this is not the exercise and that is it, and that's all you're allowed to say. It's more like getting the flow of ideas going and kind of getting used to saying things about yourself and your company, from small to huge. Even if you start with, I just want to change the world, I want to save the world, Great. Whatever the case may be, start writing, and then I'm going to stop talking.
But is it nice to use big words, like to save nature? Maybe should specify somehow.
For this exercise itself, it doesn't matter. Yeah. This is for you, maybe for your team. That if that's how you feel, if in your mind your company is here to save the world and the earth that we live on, put that on a piece of paper, please. This is totally how you feel about your company, what you want to do with your company. anything and everything. Now, when it comes to actual copy and actual words that you will put out into the world to represent your company, there are scenarios of, and I would argue that you said big words, but you didn't use any big words, but you used a big idea. So it depends.
Yeah, and this is where we like jump back to who you're talking to. Like there are certain audiences that will
Thank you.
laugh at that idea, right? Oh, save the world, or whatever. Some people will really resonate with that kind of, or if it's not the same words exactly, but those ideas. So here's like where we are already seeing why you need to know that first. But for this particular exercise, it literally doesn't matter how you say it or what you say, as long as it's all there for you to go back to later and start filtering it.
Hi, I'm so sorry. I was just able to join like a few minutes ago. So if you could just, with a few words, tell me what's the exercise.
Yeah, sorry, no problem. Okay, so we're going by kind of step by step to guide you on how to frame your, what we're calling like non-visual brand for your company. In this particular exercise, we're asking you to jot down any and all ideas. There's no judgment, there's no good ideas, there's no bad ideas of what you think of your company. What does it do? What does it solve? Who is it for? How does it work? Anything that would make an external communication point at some point, but anything up to that.
Yeah, this is completely just a brainstorming exercise and not at all meant to be polished or concerned with how it sounds. Is it the right thing to say? And this is not at all the point of this particular exercise.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'll leave it. Anyway, I didn't catch who was the person that had just asked and who just joined. There's a recording of this, but just so you know, there were 2 exercises similarly before, and they focused on who you would be talking to when thinking about your service, your product, your business. So defining your audience and figuring out categorizing them if there's more than one.
No, this is the second one.
Oh, this is the second one. Oh my gosh. Well, you didn't miss much. I mean, you missed a lot, but just in exercise time.
Right. Moving on.
Yeah.
I'll go through the recording, of course. So it's just
I thought we were like way.
Yeah, so the next question, and this will be probably a quicker one for again, you could take forever to think about this and talk about this, and you should take time to go through this, of course, but for the purposes of today, we're just going to quickly go over the where of your storytelling, and namely, where are you meeting your audience? Where will your brand sort of make the most impact? And the usual suspects here being your website, obviously, which is, where your product lives. Social media, huge. Can't really do anything without that. And this is one that, a lot of people struggle with. An example I also bring a lot is like, should I be on TikTok? Well, it depends. Is your audience on TikTok? Ours probably not so much. We don't worry about it. And then traditional media as well. I think yesterday you were talking about PR, so that would have covered this, and events in the physical space and online spaces as well.
Yeah. Also, again, if you went through the exercise, or if you will anyway, because again, what we're having you do here is just a few minutes of getting your brain working and putting it into this space. This could take you as much time as you want, actually. But if you've done the background of figuring out who you're talking to, who is your audience, who is your ideal client, then you will already be able to kind of pinpoint how you would talk to them on your website, where if on social media they are, what media you would want to be targeting for this. And I'm sure Anya and Lily yesterday kind of went over a bit kind of the tiers and what you would be thinking about. We know that they make this point very well, which is not everybody at all times needs to be in Forbes or the New York Times or whatever the case may be. In fact, it's probably fairly expensive and ineffective to some extent, depending on what your goal is. But like the mention of, we'll be targeting construction companies and agricultural. There are publications targeted for those individuals. There are networks targeted at those individuals or events or whatever the case may be. That's a much more direct way of targeting those people and figuring out what you're going to say to them while you're there, right? And you would be adjusting your story, right? Your content based on that idea of what it is that you want to be talking about to this particular audience.
Exactly. And here's why it's so important to sort of make the distinction between your overall story and your voice, and then the different tones that you use in different situations. There's recently we had an example of a company who I got the pitch from some people, like what the company's about, what they do, why they're exciting, why we need to be talking about them. I was like, that sounds amazing. Let me go check out the website. And as far as I could, the website said nothing along those lines. The copy was extremely technical, very much directed at not what I assumed their target audience was, like a very specific technical jargon. And that creates a disconnect. And that's something that you want to avoid. So you need the overarching story and your pillars of messaging and communication that you can then gently bend according to the channel that you're using.
Yeah, exactly.
Quick exercise here as well.
Yeah. Let's assume, I'm going to assume that you managed to write down at least one possible client in the first exercise of who your client would be, right? Just take one of them and jot down a few places that you could talk to this person, right? Or a person like them. Social media channels. Will you have a specific landing page for this person on your website, or target them somehow differently on your website? In different media points, just think creatively of where you could touch base with this individual and this potential client, and just jot those down. Literally giving like a minute for this, because it's very, very quick. Okay, I think that's probably enough time.
Yeah, to just get a couple of ideas on the page, and that would be perfect. And the how.
Yeah. So you know who you're talking to. You have an idea of what you want to say to them, where you can say it. Now, how do you actually say it?
First, to have anyone hear what you have to say, you have to find your voice. And we, in the industry, in the words industry, we talk a lot about tone of voice and brand personality and stuff like that. And we tend to jump in just like with these terms, and then we're surprised when people are confused. But your brand does have a voice, much like a person. It's the words you use, it's the way you say things that are sort of geared to appeal to your target audience. So like Vera was alluding to earlier, we change the way we talk depending on who we are talking to. And we all have a distinctive voice. and your brand does too. Whether you are paying any attention to it or not, you have a voice. But if you are going a little bit further than just like talking, if you find your voice and you document your voice and the way your brand sounds, and you actually write it down, you have clear guidelines on what you're saying, how you're saying it. At some point, you might want to go as granular as, you know, a style guide of like, how do we use commas and what words do we avoid, that sort of thing. But finding your voice and starting from that point and defining what your brand sounds like. Do you want to be a fun kind of brand? Does your audience sort of demand or expect you to be a more serious brand? If you have that defined, you will find it much easier to actually talk to your audience. You won't have to reinvent the wheel every time you're trying to say something. The guidelines will already be there for you, and for anyone that you hire down the line to do your communications for you. Because if your brand and the way your brand sounds exists only inside your own head, which is often the case with early stage founders, then you are going to have such a hard time later on scaling your communications and making marketing exactly. Here's another sort of reminder to kind of commit to the way you sound, to the things you're saying, and just repeat. Keep doing it. Keep making those points.
I think I'll kind of go back through the points a bit. Again, finding your voice primarily starts with probably you or your co-founder, whatever team you already have. You've already been communicating with clients or whoever it is. You've already kind of set the tone a little bit. That doesn't mean you can't change it, but it will give you insights on how it works and if it works, right? Same thing with identifying your audience. Like Maria said, you might be in an industry where you can't really be super playful. Like, I'm not seeing any managers at construction companies looking at anything with like puns on the website and appreciating it. I wish they would, and maybe they will, like, you know, on social media, but not for when they're trying to make a decision about, you know, spending X amount of money on this big investment that they're making for their company. So yes, your audience will certainly define your voice. You'll kind of have a voice that is you or your brand as a person. You can personify your brand. We recommend it. It makes it a lot easier. Would this person say it like this? Would this person throw in a curse word? Yeah. Or maybe they would never. Little things like that will help you really think about it. It'll also help you figure out what publications to go to, what social media to use, and how to use it. So your voice will have some shift, like Maria said, but at its core, it'll be the same. Again, a lot of it defined by your audience and where you're going to be using it. Saving it makes such a difference. Having even just a simple one-pager of your pillars that you just came up with, your communication points that you just came up with, how you would use them. Again, like we said, those communication points, you don't have to have the exact words for them. It could just be, we save people money, our product is reliable, we, are here to save the environment, whatever those pillars end up being. When you actually talk about them, you won't necessarily use those same words, certainly not every time, but some version of them you will. And again, that goes to the matching your points to your audience and your channel. And commit and repeat. I think we could use even like an even more like harsh way of saying it in a way is like, you're at some point going to get tired of it, and you're going to feel like you're saying the same thing over and over and over. Good. Keep doing that, because that's when people actually start connecting what you're saying with your brand. Now, of course, at this point, you might be like, but what if I'm saying the wrong thing and I'm just repeating it and I'm saying the wrong thing? This is why in the step of what you're going to test things. You're going to figure out if it's actually working or not first, if it resonates, if it's clear, if it's understandable, what you're trying to get across. And so at this point, you're not going to be saying the wrong thing. You might misstep and say it wrong 1 or 2 times, and you might see, oh, that didn't work. When I phrased this idea this way, it didn't work. But that's just how you phrased it. It's not that the idea is bad. It's that maybe your turn of phrase wasn't ideal for the audience or the channel. But either way, that repetition, as like I said, the little Red Riding Hood story, that's the key point. It's to the point where it's not going to matter who says it, whether it's somebody you're going to hire for marketing, whether it's somebody you're going to hire for any other department, right? They're going to be your voice anytime they interact with somebody outside of the company. Who do you work for? I work for Do All Right, and we do copy, content, and strategy for startups. Like, they're going to be able to do that and say that because you're going to have it documented. That's going to make it easier, right? At this stage, you might not be ready to hire people full time. Anytime you hire a freelancer that's going to be doing communications, they're going to thank you, and they're going to deliver so much better because you told them what they're allowed to say, who they're talking to, and how to say it. I guarantee you, if it's a good freelancer, they're going to ask you those things anyway. Yeah. And why would you want to answer that every single time if you could have that documented somewhere?
Yeah. And this is the sort of thing that will pay off so much down the line. Of course, obviously the hope is to get the company up and running, and you're going to have customer support agents and people who are all these touch points between you and the rest of the world. And again, we've seen instances of, if we are, say, working on copy for a company or long form content for their blog, but then we've had someone come to us with, hey, could you help me figure out email templates for customer service? Here's what we have so far. And we've looked at them and it's like, oh, this sounds like 2 completely different businesses. This is not at all the same voice. That's not to say either one was wrong, but clearly something needs adjusting, because if there's this disconnect between what the company hears or the customer hears from you on your social media versus how you sound through customer service, it creates this disjointed experience. And again, that's not to say that if you're funny on social media, you have to also be cracking jokes in your customer service. That's not it. But there's this change of sort of spectrum of tone of formal and familiar. So if you have that all at least outlined roughly from an early stage, then it's going to be so much easier for you to sort of build on that foundation.
Yeah, because if somebody has access to that very basic document from the very beginning, they're probably not going to draft customer service correspondence that's way off of that, right? So again, it's just like right now you're investing in figuring out, what your product does, who it's for, all of these really things that people think of as integral to their business. At the end of the day, if you can't communicate those things, it doesn't matter how good they are. I would venture to say that there's been lots of businesses that probably kind of died because they were created by somebody brilliant who made something brilliant but couldn't tell anyone about it, right?
Yeah.
So we don't want you to fall in the same category, and you already have the tools kind of to get on your way with doing that.
Yeah. So we have a hand raised. If you have a question, go ahead.
Thank you. I think whatever voice we have, fun or serious, it should sound confident. Yeah. Absolutely. Any advice about how to be so very confident and have voice confident voice and look for the brand?
I think the easiest thing is going through this and having your points figured out. I don't know if you or anybody else on the call has ever watched politicians answer questions. and wondered why they don't answer the questions, it's because they use a strategy effectively, right? You don't have to know all the answers. That is the one thing, but you have your talking points, right? And you have these 3 things that you can talk about, or 5 or whatever it is that you settle on, that are pivotal to your business, that are the thing that defines your business. If you know them and you're repeating them consistently, practice makes perfect. You're going to feel confident. You're going to know how to talk about them. You're going to know how to weave them into whatever question somebody is asking you. You will avoid the original question. I'm not saying you should all the time. You can say, you know, I don't know the answer to that question, but, you know, that made me think of this thing, or whatever, tie it back. So you will always have kind of your comfort blanket of your communication points, and then the rest of it, as it comes, you can figure out how to answer those questions that maybe don't relate a little bit better. But the main thing is trying it on. Once you have them, ideally what you will do at this point, right, at some point you guys are going to pitch, they're going to be part of your pitch, and you're going to stand in front of a mirror and you're going to repeat them to the mirror, repeat them to your friends or family, and then you're going to do it to a bunch of strangers. But saying the same thing kind of puts it on autopilot in your brain, and when you know what you're going to say, you automatically feel more confident. So part of it is, I think my answer is actually set yourself up for success. Know what you're going to say, and then it's much easier to actually say it.
Exactly. Know what you're going to say. Do the research. And this applies in any situation, right? Whether you're actually like in the physical space pitching to somebody, or whether you're writing a blog post, or just a LinkedIn post. Do the research. Know what you are talking about, and also don't like act like you do know everything. Like have your specific niche and be good at it, and leave room for sort of growth in that. I think the confidence will come from actually being like knowing what you're talking about, but also like it is hard to actually get to that point. So it is about practice. Keep doing it, keep trying, and get the feedback, exactly as Vera said. Yeah.
Thank you again. Thank you for advice.
Of course. Love the questions. Right.
Yeah. Okay. The last exercise actually related to this section. Who do your brand, your company sound like? We think this is the easiest way to frame this one, because it's easier for us to hear people or hear kind of characters or whatever. Take 2 minutes, figure out a character, 2 characters, maybe a combination of famous people or somebody in your life. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to make sense to anybody else but you.
Exactly.
Actually, of what your brand would sound like. Well, who would they embody? Are they somebody who's, really funny, or really serious but down to earth, or and could really be posh or not?
Yeah, it could be any combination of things. And I would say the pitfall here, but this is a bigger question, and like it's something we can dig into another time, is like this is where often you might feel like you will have to compromise, and that's where things might start sounding bland, and that's where you don't stand out. So also don't be afraid as you're sketching out this personality for your brand. Don't be afraid to like be out there. I want people to like feel amazing about themselves when they read everything I post or whatever it may be. So just go for it.
Yeah. And again, keeping in mind of who would your audience hear from, want to hear from. I can't think of course, I didn't prep any examples. But there again, like Maria said, even in B2B, a manager is a person who resonates, what kind of person would have like catch the ear of that client.
Yeah. There's a Twitter account. I think it's the English Museum for Agriculture, some kind of like small museum somewhere in the British countryside. And it's gone crazy viral. It's been viral for years now, just because they sound so fun. most people who read their tweets probably haven't even been there, probably never will, but they found their voice. They found exactly what they want to sound like, and they're going with it. So it's just like, even if you feel like your brand can never be super exciting, because some businesses just like aren't designed to be sexy, you can still like have an engaging and compelling voice.
Yeah.
We're like, we're gonna let you write, and then I would not stop talking. You're doing that.
Give you like 30 seconds more because we did talk a while, but we're going to assume that some of you probably wrote.
There's the timer.
There's the timer.
Race against the clock over here. Yeah. All right. Oh, we're actually slide-wise, so we've arrived.
Arrived at the finish line. Okay, I think we do have a little bit of time left. Let's use it wisely. If you have questions that you've thought of and you would like to ask, please do ask them at this time. You have our ear and our time. If you want to share what you've written about any section that we went over, and I because people did join at different times, let's go over like what you should have on your piece of paper or in your document or whatever the case is. One or two or as many examples as you need of your audience, who your clients are. Then we talked about what it is that you're saying to them, right? At this point, we don't expect you to actually know what you're saying to them and the most important things about your company, but starting a list of ideas that you have in your head, right? You probably keep a list of ideas about your product or your service or features or whatever the case may be. This is the same thing about communicating externally of what your business is and does. The third thing was where you're you actually talking with your audience, whether it's on social media, in publications, at events, in actual like physical spaces, in terms of billboards or whatever the case may be. That might work for your brand, depending on, again, who your audience is and where they hang out. Kind of ideas you can again recommend to divide those up by your target audience. Different people will be in different places. And then the last one is kind of who do you sound like? What does your brand sound like? Not everyone has to have a really silly voice or something. But I will say as a caveat, you can be serious and still sound like you're talking to people. Exactly. I think that is one thing that a lot of people kind of misstep on, or a lot of brands misstep on, is that we equate professionalism and being knowledgeable and professional to kind of very monotone nonverbal or like written expression. It doesn't have to be that way. It is harder to read, it is harder to understand, and it won't get you as far as actually saying things simply and clearly like you would be talking to that person in a room. I think that is really important. And I think that reflects back to the question. I'm sorry, I'm so bad with names. I've seen your name on the screen a couple times, but you asked about using big words. And again, I said you didn't use big words. Big words don't really necessarily work because it matters what your audience wants to hear and how they want to be talked to. And big words kind of alienate people.
Yeah, these are the things, like you can sprinkle them on here and there occasionally and it will be perfectly fine. But yes, like definitely, I would also recommend like avoiding that pitfall of trying to sound smart and or trying to sound more confident by, you know, putting up a wall of big words and just kind of like waiting behind the wall and hoping for the best. It's much better to just make yourself understood. And I use this phrase half seriously, to dumb it down a little bit. If you're finding yourself using big words because that's how you talk about your own product, because you're so familiar with the terms, then do consider sort of like toning it down a little bit for your audiences, unless they are at the exact same level and you find that they expect that from you. And that's when we once again jump back to who's your audience.
Yeah.
If it works, then that's what you can go with. So, and this is
test
it out. Exactly. Yeah. It is a lot of mixing and matching. It's audiences and tones, and kind of seeing, oh, who responds to what? And like, oh, I posted that and it sounded like that and I got a lot of engagement on that. Or people said, hey, I love that blog post, or whatever it is. Like you can get these even without asking specifically. And we recommend that you do ask people specifically for feedback. But if you're getting these organic bits of like information about how what you are doing is working, maybe, you know, you're doing a pitch, you just go and like, hey, what did you think about that?
What worked? What didn't work? Yeah, if you have content that you put up, you can easily track, you know, what's converting, what isn't converting, click-through rates, things like that. Once you have it, whether if you maybe you already know these things and how to do them, or you have marketing support at some point, they will help guide you through this. But at the end of the day, you guys are all founders. You know, the pitfall is you guys know your idea the best, you know your mission the best, but this is an exercise to boil it down into something you can share externally and internally, anybody who wants to hear, and that everybody walks away with a clear idea of what it is that you're doing and building and how they fit into that puzzle, and they can share it to somebody else, right? Don't have any questions, it looks like. I don't think we have any hands.
No hands, but maybe we have some free form. Anyone want to jump in with anything specific? If you do have a specific question about your business specifically, that is also specifically, then now's a good time. Whether it's about like the more general things or more specific like issues.
Did you say specific? Or?
Yes, just to be clear, specific.
No questions. I can only assume that everybody's very busy working on this exercise, and you're thrilled to figure out what it is you want to say about your business and to whom.
We have a raised hand. Go for it.
I'm not sure if the question is relevant, but I just started thinking about, you know, when you go around and pitch your idea all around, you know, the same way, exactly as you said, you have some certain, you know, words and sentences, but I have seen it on myself that at some point I just sound boring to myself because I just talk about the same thing all over again. So I'm just wondering if you have some tips for that.
Do not bore yourself.
Do not, yeah, because that's not a life any one of us wants to live, because you have to like keep yourself interested in what you have to say. I think, and that's one of those things that, you know, it has very obvious pros and cons. The good part about that is that you get really good at doing it and you don't have to think about it. So you're like relieving yourself of the mental strain of having to remember what to say. But then obviously there's you might sound robotic at some point. You'll zone out yourself. You're not even paying attention to where you are.
Can I ask a kind of qualifying question? Do you mean that you are literally pitching like the same word for word pitch, or just that you're making the same point in your pitch and that's also boring?
No, it's I never do things word by word in the same, but it's just like when, you know, networking and meeting people, and then they ask you what you're doing, and then you of course you're saying the same things, but I've just seen that, you know, it sounds, yeah, exactly, it sounds robotic to myself at some point. Yeah, so but at the same time, exactly, you feel more confident, you know what you're saying, you're not choosing the words. But at some point it starts to feel really odd.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the most fun sort of solutions I've seen to this, I don't remember who it was, but I remember when I asked, hey, so what do you do? What does your company do? And he was like, hey, I have to tell people all the time. So I've given myself a little challenge of seeing what is the shortest pitch that I can make that still gets the point across. So you can sort of make it like a little bit of an exercise for yourself of how can I do this in a way that doesn't bore me, right? What should I be saying that still gets the same point across? Is it shorter? Do you make a point of rearranging the paragraphs in your sort of little pitch, or sort of gamify it for yourself in a way?
I think right, you can try to play up, maybe only use it as a test case almost. Yes. Like you know, if you have your 3 points or however many you're making, try to play up one more and then kind of make the other one secondary or not mention them, and then go back and ask, like, hey, what did you think of, like, do you remember what I do, or whatever the case may be. You can also kind of play around with your audience, right? You're going to different probably events, maybe with different people, or kind of, I don't know, maybe because of something we're doing separately. I'm thinking of HR events, like how we would pitch ourselves at HR events is slightly different than we would, you know, talk about ourselves maybe here. Try to like give yourself a challenge of how can I actually make this even more relevant to this audience, especially if that audience has nothing to do with your customer base. See if there's like a way you can connect them. Because I wouldn't sway from your points. They are important. You should be repeating them, but you're right. You can figure out kind of fun ways to play around with it. And honestly, like, one person isn't gonna make a huge difference in the scheme of things. And it's, you know, then you can ask for feedback. Like I'm always like,
that's like part of it is like, you can do like a little meta exercise, like, hey, I'm trying out a new pitch too. Like if you're like laughing at yourself a little bit, because I think it's like in these environments where we're all trying to pitch like ourselves to each other and like listen to pitches and count, like your recipient has also already heard countless pitches. They're going to want one that's more interesting and memorable. So if you're like, take a moment to like laugh about it a little bit with that next person, like, hey, like, how much of this have you heard tonight already? Or depending on the situation, obviously, and depending on the person. But like, I often find that because most of us are already pretty jaded with all of this stuff, and we do zone out a bit, adding like a layer of humor can work. And so that would be one of my suggestions.
Have fun with it if you can.
Exactly. And also, like, if it feels really high stakes, you know, like, oh my God, what if this is the investor and I say the wrong word?
Don't do it on that one.
Don't try it out on those people. But even then, like the people that want to invest in you do also want to invest in you, and they want to see your personality, and like they want to, because investors might think that they make all their decisions like based on like hard data and just like, you know, spreadsheets or whatever. We make decisions way more emotionally than we think. So if they are like engaged with you in conversation that they're enjoying and you're making the right points, then, you know,
you might not get the money, but you might know a foot in the door, right?
Exactly.
So because again, at the end of the day, we're talking to people. But yeah, try to have fun with it. Maybe if you really feel it, like if you're really feeling over it that day, maybe try to play up like the thing that made you start this company or come up with this idea. Share that story. Instead of the actual pitch. or like the points about the company. I think that is also really impactful because it is a story that people can remember, ties to your company, and is emotionally charged.
Yeah, and that's the part of storytelling that we didn't really cover, but it's the part that people, I think, associate the most with when we say, what's your company story? They assume that they're going to have to tell us exactly where they were when they when they had this world-changing idea, but that's not quite it, but that's also definitely an element of it. So if you have like a story that you think is interesting about how and why you founded this company, of course weave it in, because it's all part of the brand. Your brand as a founder is so
especially now,
so interwoven with your brand. So it's all connected.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good tip. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you for the question. I don't see any other hands. That's okay. I think what we'll do is we will wrap up because we talked about it. Well, actually, if you are at a loss for words, as right now, with no questions, you guys obviously are. If you have any word strategy communication questions, reach out to us, hey@doallright.com, and we will get back to you. Happy to help you think through this process if you do embark on it, and we do encourage you to, especially since you guys have pitches coming up more than anything. Yeah, I think the other thing that I actually wanted to say is that since we talked about feedback and getting feedback and how important it is, please also use the same email address. You can drop us a few words about how much you loved this workshop and how valuable it is. Or
that was really bad.
The other way is also okay, because our point is to bring value to anybody who's taking the time to listen to us. So if you feel like there was something that you would have liked covered, or maybe you didn't quite understand that we can be more effective in communicating with other people in the future, please do let us know. It's really important for us to use our time and other people's time wisely. So we would love to hear from you on what you thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you all so much for being here this evening. I just got a group chat message that there's someone that I know in this room who was surprised to see me here. Hi. which was nice. Last chance for questions.
Yeah, going once, going twice. All right.
Thank you very much for an interesting course.
Yeah,
thank you so much
for joining us. We really appreciate it. We hope you keep going with this. I think we know from our work with clients that it will be really useful to you.
Absolutely. And yes, please do get in touch if you need any guidance on any of this, because this is what we love to do.
Yeah. All right. I think we can all hop off unless, Jana, you need any other admin stuff to wrap up on your part. I think probably not. Yeah. Okay. Ciao, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And have a good night.
Bye.
Ciao.